They pray to you now, not on their knees, not with words, but in the quiet inventory they run of their choices every time they hear your name mentioned in a room. In the way they check to see what you are building before they decide what they are building. In the middle of the night scroll through your life that they would never admit to, looking for evidence that you have peaked, that the momentum is slowing, that the thing you have become is temporary. They are looking for a crack they can breathe through. There is no crack. In the searching, the compulsive, private, unable to stop themselves searching, is what worship looks like when it comes from someone who resents what they are worshiping. They cannot stop. And they cannot explain why they cannot stop. Because explaining it would require admitting what you have become to them. Which is the one thing they will never do out loud. If you felt that land somewhere true, type the word "seen" in the comments. Because you have been aware of this energy circling you, and you have not had language for it yet. Now you do. There is a specific moment when the balance of power between two people shifts permanently. It does not happen the way films suggest. No confrontation, no declaration, no scene where the music swells and the power dynamic reverses in front of witnesses. It happens privately. Inside the person who held the power. In a moment they are alone with the evidence of what you have become, and the realization arrives that the story they were telling about you, the one where you were smaller, slower, less significant, heading nowhere, that story is no longer sustainable. They do not tell you about that moment. They absorb it alone. And the absorption changes everything about how they move in every room where you might be present, in every conversation where your name surfaces, in every comparison their mind runs between the trajectory of your life and the trajectory of their own. That moment has already happened. You may have felt it without being able to source it, a shift in the temperature of certain relationships, a change in the way people who once dismissed you now choose their words, a quality of attention from people who used to look through you that has become something else. Something more careful. Something that has recognized it can no longer afford to be casual. In the book of Genesis, Joseph's brothers threw him in a pit and then sat down to eat. That detail is almost unbearable in its specificity. They did not agonize. They had lunch. The casualness of the cruelty, the ease with which they moved on from what they had done, is exactly what made the later encounter in Egypt so devastating in its reversal. When famine came, they stood in front of the governor of Egypt with their heads bowed, asking for grain. They did not recognize him. Why would they? The person they had last seen was a 17-year-old at the bottom of a pit, stripped of his robe, inventory of nothing. The person they were bowing to was the second most powerful man in the known world. The gap between those two images was too large for their assumptions to bridge. He recognized them immediately. And he wept before he revealed himself. Not from bitterness, the weeping is not rage finding a soft expression. It was the weight of the full arc of the story landing on him at once. The pit. The years. The silence of God that was actually the precision of God. All of it arriving in the moment where the people who had written him off were standing before him entirely dependent on his mercy. You are not Joseph in that story waiting for the moment of reveal. You are already past it. The reveal has happened. The people who ate lunch after throwing you away are already standing in the grain line. They may not be physically present in front of you, but in the economy of their inner lives, the bowing is already occurring. Every time they measure themselves against you and come up short. Every time they realize that the robe they stripped from you did not contain the gift, The gift was the person, and the person outgrew every container they tried to use to limit it. Press the like button right now as an act of receipt, as a declaration that you accept the fullness of what you have become. To become someone's God is to become the standard against which they measure themselves without meaning to. The involuntary benchmark. The name that appears in their head when they are deciding whether what they have accomplished is enough. The face. They imagine watching when they make a choice they know is beneath them. You did not ask for this position. You did not campaign for it. You simply became something, through years of quiet work and sustained integrity in refusing to be the lesser version of yourself that their actions tried to produce, and that becoming installed you in a position in their psychology that they cannot evict you from. The irony is complete. They tried to diminish you. And in the attempt, in the very act of targeting you and underestimating you and making you a project of their insecurity, they made you central to their story in a way that no positive relationship could have achieved. If they had simply left you alone, you would have moved past them without either of you leaving much trace on the other. The attack is what bound them to you. The harm is what made you load-bearing in their internal architecture. They built the altar themselves, and now they cannot unbuild it. Drop the number 444 in the comments if you understand what I am describing right now. Because this is the part that people do not talk about, the strange, uncomfortable, almost disorienting reality of realizing that the people who tried to diminish you are now in some way defined by you. Paul wrote to the Philippians from prison. The letter is remarkable not for its theology, which is dense and precise, but for its tone, a kind of joy that is almost aggressive in its refusal to be qualified by the circumstances of the person expressing it. He writes about contentment learned through every state, about the peace that passes understanding, about pressing toward a mark that the circumstances of a Roman cell could not obstruct or even slow. The letter does not read like a man imprisoned. It reads like a man who has discovered that the interior dimensions of his life are completely outside the jurisdiction of whoever holds the physical keys to his cell. The people who tried to contain you had the cell. They did not have what the cell was built to contain. The robe, the position, the resources, those were in the cell. You were not. The thing that made you what you are, the specific quality of character, the depth of vision, the capacity for faithfulness under sustained pressure, those did not fit through the cell door. And it was in the time they spent thinking they had you contained that those qualities continued developing, completely beyond their reach, into exactly what is now visible in your life and impossible for them to ignore. There is something that happens to people who watch someone they once dismissed become undeniable. It operates in layers, and understanding the layers is useful for navigating what you are likely already experiencing in certain relationships. The first layer is denial. The initial response to evidence that the story they told about you is wrong is to find an explanation that preserves the story. You got lucky. You had help they do not know about. The success is recent and therefore fragile and will reveal itself as temporary. The denial is active and creative. It requires effort to maintain, which is itself evidence of the pressure the reality is exerting on it. The second layer is adjustment. The denial becomes unsustainable over time as the evidence accumulates. The adjustment looks like a quiet revision of their public position. No admission that they were wrong, no acknowledgement that the story changed, but a subtle recalibration of how they speak about you, how much space they allow for your significance, how they position themselves in relation to what you have built. People who once talked over you in rooms now wait slightly longer before speaking. People who once offered unsolicited assessments of your work have gone quiet in their assessments. The adjustment is visible if you know what you are watching for. The third layer is the one that keeps them awake. The recognition, private and unspoken, that the quality that makes you what you are is not something they could have acquired by doing what they did. They did not get your position by outworking you or outthinking you or by legitimate outcompeting. They got temporary advantage by exploiting the rules that you are choosing to follow. And temporary advantage against someone who keeps growing is not advantage. It is a loan from a future that will come due. I want to speak to something you have probably felt but may have been reluctant to fully claim. The guilt of becoming the reference point. Because there is a kind of person, the kind of person you are, who is taught that occupying space with full confidence is somewhere close to arrogance, that being the standard is something that happens to other people, that the healthy response to becoming significant in someone else's story is to deflect it, minimize it, redirect the attention somewhere more modest. That instinct served a purpose in an earlier season. It protected you from the specific kind of exposure that comes with standing fully upright in environments where standing fully upright made you a target. But the environment has changed. The targets have shifted. And the instinct that used to be protective is now a form of self-diminishment that has outlived its usefulness. You are allowed to know what you are. Not with arrogance. Arrogance is what insecurity produces when it needs an audience. With accuracy. The same accuracy you would apply to any honest assessment of any real thing. Looking at what you have built, what you have survived, what you have become on the other side of years of sustained opposition and interior discipline, and calling it what it is, which is significant, which is real. Which is precisely what the people circling your life and unable to stop cannot deny when they are alone with the evidence. Claim it. Fully. This is the work of this season. Tell me where you are watching from right now. Drop your city and your country in the comments, because the person I am describing does not live in one place. They are in Istanbul and Lagos and Sao Paulo and Seoul and Birmingham and Vancouver, and every one of them has been in a room where someone looked through them and got it catastrophically wrong. Every one of them is now living in the aftermath of the miscalculation. And all of them need to hear this word landing specifically where they are. The Transfiguration is an account that does not get enough attention in conversations about identity. Jesus takes 3 of his disciples up a mountain, and in front of them his appearance changes. His face shines like the sun, his clothes become white as light, and Moses and Elijah appear and talk with him. 2 of the most towering figures in the entire history of Israel, present in conversational. And then a voice from a cloud confirms what the appearance was already communicating. This is my son, in whom I am well pleased. The disciples fell on their faces. And then Jesus touched them and told them to get up and not be afraid. Which is the interesting instruction, not stand here and absorb the full weight of what you just witnessed, not process the theological implications, but get up and do not be afraid. As if the primary risk after an encounter with the full revealed identity of someone is that the witnesses will be so overwhelmed by it that they cannot function. The people who once dismissed you are having their transfiguration moment. They are encountering the full revealed identity of someone they thought they had sized up correctly, and the gap between their assessment and the reality is enormous enough to be disorienting. Their version of falling on their faces looks like the behaviors I described earlier, the compulsive checking, the quiet adjustment of their public position, the private accounting that never resolves in their favor. You are not responsible for their recovery from the encounter. You did not arrange the mountain. You did not choose the timing. You simply became what you were always becoming, and the becoming has produced a revelation that is operating on people around you whether you intended it to or not. Subscribe and stay connected here, because the conversation happening in this channel is built specifically for the person who is navigating the specific season you are in right now. The season where the becoming is visible, where the opposition is recalibrating, where the work of the previous years is producing its fruit and the fruit is attracting attention that you now have to learn to carry without either shrinking from it or being changed by it in the wrong direction. There is a gravity that develops around a person who has been through what you have been through and come out with their character intact. People are drawn to it even when they cannot explain why. Even the people who opposed you feel it, which is part of what makes their circling so disorienting to them. They are being pulled toward the thing they tried to push away. The gravity is impartial. It does not ask about the history. In the physical world, gravity is a function of mass. The more mass, the more gravitational pull. In the spiritual world, something analogous operates. The more substance, the more pull. And substance in this context is not talent or appearance or strategic positioning. It is the density of character that accumulates in a person who has been tested at depth and has not been found hollow. You have been tested at depth. You are not found hollow. The testing added density rather than removing it. And the density is what people are responding to when they find themselves unable to look away from what you are building, unable to stop measuring themselves against it, unable to dismiss you the way they once could. The ones who tried to hollow you out inadvertently revealed that hollowing out was impossible. That was the information they could not have gotten any other way. And that information, that the thing they targeted was indestructible at its core, is the foundation of everything they now cannot stop watching. Let me address the version of you that is still slightly uncomfortable with what I am saying. The part that was formed in an environment where standing in your full significance was dangerous, where being seen clearly was followed by being targeted, where the safest strategy was to stay slightly smaller than you actually were so as not to attract the kind of attention that brings the wrong people into range. That strategy was not wrong. It was the accurate read of a specific environment at a specific time. The people who taught you smallness, through their actions if not their words, were operating in an environment where your size was a threat to their stability. Your containment was a structural requirement of their world. The problem is that strategies developed for environments have a way of becoming personality, of outlasting the environments that produced them, of running as background software long after the original threat has been removed. The environment is different now. The people who required your smallness are no longer in the room, or they are in the room in a reduced capacity that no longer has the power to enforce what they once enforced. And the software is still running. The habit of making yourself slightly less than the full version is still executing, out of a reflex developed in a context that no longer exists. This is the work of this season. Noticing the software. Choosing not to run it. Not in a dramatic overhaul, in the small, daily choices of allowing yourself to be exactly what you are without the apologetic qualifier, without the reflexive minimization, without the instinctive step back from the space your life has legitimately claimed. Comment the word thrown in the comments right now, not as ego, not as dominance, but as your acknowledgement that the seat of authority in the stories of the people who came against you was yours. You did not take it. They vacated it. The moment they bet against you, they ceded the throne in their own narrative to the person they bet against. That is a spiritual law older than any of the people involved in its operation. And it is working in your life right now with the same reliability it has always worked. I want to talk about what living from this position requires, because the position comes with a discipline that most conversations about favor and restoration skip entirely. Becoming someone's benchmark, their involuntary standard, the name in their head when they are deciding if they have done enough, creates a specific temptation. The temptation is to manage the image rather than continue the substance. To spend energy ensuring that the visible output continues to confirm the position, which is a different activity than continuing to do the work that produced the position in the first place. One is performance. The other is the thing that generates genuine gravity. Solomon received wisdom and managed it beautifully for years. And then the management became the point. The acquisition of things that confirm the position, the wealth, the alliances, the structures of prestige, gradually displaced the pursuit of the wisdom that had generated everything else. The throne became its own master. And the man who had asked for wisdom and been trusted with abundance ended the chapter of his life significantly reduced from the person he was at its beginning. The warning is not dramatic. The drift from substance to performance is always quiet. It is incremental. It is the natural pull of a position that has become visible toward the maintenance of the visibility. And the only protection against it is the same orientation that produced the position in the first place, the facing toward rather than the looking at what you have built, the continued movement toward the thing you are called to rather than the management of what that calling has produced. Stay moving. The gravity you generate is a function of continued becoming, not of arrived position. The moment you stop becoming and start maintaining, the gravity diminishes. And the people who are watching, both those who celebrate you and those who cannot stop circling you with their envy, will feel the diminishment before you announce it. There is a specificity to what heaven recognizes in you that the general language of favor and blessing cannot fully carry. What is recognized is not your talent, though the talent is real. What is recognized is the specific combination of gifts and wounds and choices and years that produce the exact instrument your assignment requires. The particular shape of your compassion, which was carved by the particular shape of your suffering. The specific quality of your authority, which was forged in the specific seasons of sustained opposition. The precise calibration of your discernment, which was sharpened by the exact experiences of being read wrong by people who should have known better. Nobody else has this specific combination. The combination is custom. And custom instruments are recognized by the assignments they were built for in a way that off-the-shelf instruments are not. The room that is opening to you, the conversations that are forming around your life, the opportunities that are beginning to materialize, they are materializing because the assignment they carry recognized the instrument it was designed for. The people in your past could not have produced this version of you by being kind to you. They could only have produced a version of you that had not been tested at the depth your instrument required. In the strangest possible accounting, you owe the shape of your gift to the very people who were trying to prevent you from having one. They did not know they were working for you. But the work they did was real. You are not the person they dismissed anymore. But more importantly, and this is what I want to leave you with, you are not the person who needed their validation to know that anymore. The shift that constitutes the real victory is not that you have become undeniable to them. It is that their denial has become irrelevant to you. You are not standing in your significance waiting for them to confirm it. You are simply standing in it, in their recognition or lack of recognition as information about them and carries no weight in your own accounting of who you are. That is the throne. not elevation above them, distance from their opinion. The position where what they think about you has genuinely stopped being something you check on. Where the measuring rod you apply to your own life is not theirs but the one you forged in the years of doing the work when no one was watching and no one was confirming, and the only reason to keep going was the conviction that the work was real and the assignment was yours and the completion of it was the point. The God of their story does not need their prayers to sustain his existence. He exists outside their narrative entirely. He is just building. He is just moving. He is simply and completely in with full authority, being who he was always going to be, regardless of whether anyone who once tried to prevent it ever acknowledges what they were actually looking at. That is you right now. Drop an amen in the comments if this landed in the right place. Let that be the sound of your arrival. Not into a new season, into yourself. Fully. Without the asterisk. The standard you have become for them is permanent. Not because you did anything to ensure it. Because the quality that produced what they cannot look away from is not conditional on continued confirmation. It is structural. It is in you now the way the formation of years is always in the thing it formed. You cannot unforgive yourself into mediocrity. You cannot unsurrender your way back to the version of you that their plans required you to stay. The becoming is complete. What remains is the living of it. The daily choice to inhabit the full dimension of who you are without apology, without looking back at the permission that was never going to come from the people who needed you smaller, without waiting for a moment of validation that already arrived, quietly, without fanfare. In the texture of ordinary days, the moment you kept moving in the direction of your assignment, and the movement did not stop. It has not stopped. It is not going to stop. And every person who ever bet against it is living with that knowledge now, in the private space where the honest accounting happens, where the face they see when they close their eyes and imagine what they could have become is yours. That is what it means to be their God. You did not choose it. You simply refused to be destroyed. And that refusal, sustained across years of sustained opposition, produced something that operates in the stories of everyone who encountered you, as a standard, as a proof, as an unmovable reminder that the thing they tried to extinguish was, in fact, inextinguishable. Walk in that. All the way in. Without a single look over your shoulder at the people still standing in the rubble of the ceiling they built over your life.